Welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Joining me now is Sara Dorn, politics reporter here at Forbes. Sara, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Of course, as you know, it was a chaotic start to the weekend. When you and I last talked, there were 6 rounds of voting for Kevin McCarthy, still no speaker. Now it went up to 15 when he finally clinched the gavel. So can you recap for us the mayhem surrounding the last few votes?
Yeah, so this vote stretched into early Saturday morning. It was after 1 a.m. that McCarthy was finally elected, following a lot of political theater playing out on the House floor. C-SPAN cameras captured all of it. Very, very exciting television for something that's, typically inside baseball and politics. So McCarthy ended up winning 216 votes on the final ballot. That's one more than the 215 that he needed to clinch the speakership. Now, early in the week, you may have heard the number 218 being bantied about as the number of votes that he needed to reach the majority threshold, because there are 435 members of the House. That number was lowered to 215 by the final ballot because we had 6 members who voted present. So their votes essentially did not count. By the one of the final rounds of voting, the 14th round, he ended up flipping 15 Republican votes, but there were still several who were voting against him. And so by the 15th round, 6 members voted present, which allowed him to win the majority. And yes, again, lots of drama leading up to that. Marjorie Taylor Greene holding up her phone with Donald Trump on the line. Mike Rogers had to be restrained, physically restrained, when he confronted Matt Gaetz, who had voted present in the 14th round, causing McCarthy to lose by 1 vote.
It really was like watching reality TV on Friday night, between McCarthy yelling at Gaetz, the other congressman being restrained, things like that. But as we talked about last time, and it's since progressed, McCarthy had to concede even more to win the gavel. What are some of the concessions that we know about?
So the House is preparing to vote on what is known as the rules package that lay out many of these concessions this evening. One of the major concessions is lowering the threshold that for the number of members who have to agree to begin the process for ejecting the speaker, and that process is known as the motion to vacate. Previously, a majority of the conference was needed. A majority of the conference of whichever party is in power was needed in order to begin that process. And it has now been knocked down to 1 member. And there are other, McCarthy backers, moderates in Congress, who are expressing a lot of concern about this rule change, and that it would allow any member, anytime they disagree with McCarthy, to bring up the motion to vacate and really put Congress at a standstill. Another concession that is being discussed and debated today in the lead up to the vote on the rules package is the freezing of federal spending at fiscal year 2022 levels for fiscal year 2024. So Congress is proposing that there are no increases in spending in the upcoming budget negotiations, which will begin at the end of September when the current fiscal year ends. And the main concern is that this would hamstring defense spending and prevent the military from spending on, new programs, new developments. We have a lot of conservative defense hawks who are very much against this. Tony Gonzalez, a 20-year veteran of the military, has come out and said he is definitively voting no on the rules package due to this concession. And Representative Nancy Mace of North Carolina is another member who has expressed some serious reservations about it. And Tony Gonzalez on Fox News this morning actually also mentioned the motion to vacate and his concerns regarding that concession as well.
With all of these concessions, what type of leader can Kevin McCarthy be?
It's interesting. A lot of people are saying that he basically had to give up the speakership in order to hold on to it. But at the same time, his opponents, on the Sunday talk shows over the weekend, were calling him a very skilled leader and negotiator, and saying that, he had a great candor throughout the negotiations, really kept a level head, and was able to accomplish what was a difficult feat. And Mike Rogers, the congressman who confronted Matt Gaetz, he's a longtime critic of the House Freedom Caucus. And, even those two have patched things up since this showdown over the weekend. So I think that it did make some headway in laying out how these conservatives expect moderates and leadership to negotiate with them moving forward. And they did establish their boundaries, if you will, and their leadership prowess, on the other side of McCarthy. So I think that, he proved it was a tough road, but he did prove that he can get it done. And, Scott Perry was one of his opponents who over the weekend, as I said, on the Sunday talk shows, was calling him, an extraordinarily talented leader. And there have been a number of statements from his opponents saying that they look forward to working with him moving forward. So I think this is, sort of a happy moment for Republicans. Conservatives have what they want. McCarthy has his speakership. Of course, there's a lot of concern and, underlying chaos that we saw play out about how this is going to affect, some hot button issues and things that are really a huge priority for Congress to get done moving forward.
Kevin McCarthy did eke out that victory. It was ugly, but he did get there. And what we saw last week was a few hard-right Republicans really hold this speakership hostage from the majority of the Republicans. So does this foreshadow their outsized strength in the next session?
Absolutely. I mean, they were, leading up to this, there were a number of moderates saying, we don't understand what their end game is here. And there are a number of significant concessions, but I think that they were really trying to solidify and show what their strategy is going to be moving forward, and just, make a stance and a statement and say to moderates, to leadership, you are going to have to negotiate with us. We will not be silenced. The hard right movement might not be as powerful as it was under former President Donald Trump, but we plan to carry it on, and you will have to negotiate with us. And there are a number of, as I said, hot button, high priority issues coming up that conservatives can really use to their advantage and leverage the seriousness of these issues in negotiating other demands, whether it's, immigration, cuts to spending. I mean, broad cuts to spending. That's something that, is just a part of the conservative movement. But, already tonight, they're set to vote. The House is set to vote on its first piece of legislation, which is to roll back, an $80 million infusion in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a signature of Biden policy that would fund the IRS and pay for, 87,000 more IRS agents. So, we can expect a lot of that moving forward, particularly regarding the debt ceiling fight. At some point late in the summer, the $31 trillion debt ceiling will have to be raised, or we risk the government defaulting on its legal obligations, Medicare and Social Security payments, and even a government shutdown. So that is a huge negotiating tool that we can expect the conservatives to use moving forward, and it's already being talked about in the halls of Congress.
And you said that they patched things up, but we did see just a few days ago one member of Congress having to be physically restrained on the House floor. So what do you think that this says overall, this fight, this week-long chaos, say about the Republican Party?
Well, there's something that happened today, actually, that is sort of, I think in general terms, it says that the Republican Party is there's still this coalition of right-wing members who are not willing to bow to what they would call the establishment. And, even though they're in the minority, they want to assert their power and make sure that they, have leverage in opposing leadership and, opposing the stronger, larger coalition of moderates who are in Congress, even though at times you would hear many moderates say throughout the last week during the speaker election, ideologically, they do align with conservatives more so in many ways, but it's this chaotic style of governing that they disagree with. But I think in order to maintain their identity, to carry out, to continue the Trump politics that many of them were elected on. This is the strategy that they have to take. But there's an example of something that unfolded today. A lot of people are tying it to the incident with Mike Rogers and Matt Gaetz, where, again, Mike Rogers had to be restrained on the House floor when he confronted Matt Gaetz because he essentially blocked McCarthy's win in the 14th round. Mike Rogers was a prominent member on the steering committee, which doles out committee assignments. He announced today that he is stepping back from the steering committee. He did not explicitly say that it was due to the confrontation with Matt Gaetz, but committee assignments were such a huge sticking point over the last week, and that McCarthy early in the week had threatened conservatives. And you heard Lauren Boebert talk about this on the House floor and saying that their committee assignments were at risk if he did not support them. And that is being seen as, a negotiating flaw in what McCarthy did last week, because it really angered conservatives. And Mike Rogers alluded to that when he confronted Gaetz on the House floor. He said, "I will not forget this." And so, today, again, Mike Rogers resigning from the steering committee, and who has become the speaker designee on the steering committee, it's Byron Donalds, who, as you know, was not nominated by conservatives last week. Is it like an insurgent challenger or to McCarthy? Very unexpected, but he did end up being heavily involved in the negotiations. And I think I even told you last week when you asked me, like, who are the rising Republican stars in all of this, I mentioned Byron Donalds. And, just today, first day of official business underway, and he has a prominent position on the steering committee, and Mike Rogers he's stepped down. So
I want to talk now about how Americans feel about this. You covered a survey that polled Americans' response to this Republican infighting and the speakership fight in general. How did the public overall feel about the way the vote went down?
Most adults disapproved of the speaker election process, 55%. This is according to a CBS YouGov survey, reliable organization, that was taken January 4th through 6th. So as the speaker vote was ongoing, 45% said that they approved of the process, but among Republican survey respondents, 64% approved and 36% disapproved of the process. So there's some stark differences there, and you can, imagine why. It's because Republicans or conservatives at least, were doing this in order to, assert more power and have more leverage in negotiating things that are important to conservatives, and that a lot of Americans, particularly Republicans who are paying attention to a process like this, they agree with some of those things ideologically.
And how does the American public feel about Kevin McCarthy himself?
So only 14% of survey respondents have a favorable opinion of Kevin McCarthy. 34% said that they have an unfavorable opinion of him. But I think most notable is that 32% are neutral. And the numbers were even more stark. I don't have them in front of me for Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader in the House on the Democrat side. Very few people were even familiar with him. And so I think that it says a lot about, Nancy Pelosi has been the speaker for some time now. When people hear speaker, they associate that position with her. And I think the speaker elections typically are very inside baseball. This isn't historically something that people pay attention to. It's done very quickly, and it's not until the governing gets underway that people have time to really form their opinion of who the speaker is. So I think that's what is reflected by these numbers.
As we're looking toward the next 2 years, Joe Biden's a Democrat, he's the president. Republicans control the House, Democrats control the Senate. Do voters want Republicans and Democrats to come together for the next 2 years?
Yes. So the vast majority of respondents, 70%, want House Republicans to prioritize working with Biden and the Democrats. In contrast, 30% want them to oppose Biden and the Democrats' policies. And, even among Republicans are almost evenly split when it comes to whether or not they want House Republicans to oppose and go after Biden and his policies. So I think that we're seeing a lot of fatigue with this divisive style of politics that we've had since 2016 when Trump was elected. And yes, again, 48% of Republicans want them to work with the opposing party, and only 50% want the GOP to challenge Democrats. Nonetheless, the GOP is already moving forward with a series of investigations as early as today, the first day that after, the new Congress was sworn in. They've, announced plans to begin requesting information from the Biden administration regarding their communications with big tech. This is like in an effort to investigate censorship that they feel has cost them many elections. They've announced, investigations into the Biden administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, immigration policies. Hunter Biden is a major target. So despite their intentions, Americans do not have, much of an appetite for this, and that even extends to Republicans.
Well, we will definitely keep an eye out on how it all shakes out. Sara Dorn, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany.